Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a challenge that I'm sure a lot of you have faced. How do you untangle a complex, monolithic application? We're going to walk through a really practical guide for breaking it down into clean, manageable microservices.
So, let me ask you something. Does making one tiny change in your code feel like you're playing a high-stakes game of Jenga? You pull out one little block and you're just holding your breath hoping the whole thing doesn't come crashing down? Yeah, if that sounds familiar, you are likely wrestling with a monolith.
And this slide, well, it lays it all out, doesn't it? It's the two competing philosophies. Over on the left, you've got the monolith, this single, giant, tightly coupled beast. And because everything's connected, it's slow to change. And worse, a single bug can bring the whole system down. But on the right, that's the microservices approach, a collection of smaller, independent services that are totally decoupled. And that makes your system way more agile and resilient, because you can update or scale each little piece on its own.
Okay, so to make this real, we're not just going to talk theory. We're going to look at a classic example from the Code with J channel. It's a Node.js monolith, and it's a perfect case study because all the services are so tangled up that making any change feels like a huge risk.
So in this application, the lines between what does what are just completely gone. You've got the customer service, for instance, directly referencing the product model to handle things like shopping carts and wish lists. This creates what's called a hard dependency, a tight coupling that we absolutely, positively have to break.
And this quote right here, this is that aha moment. It's the developer literally realizing, hey, wait a minute, product information has no business being inside the customer service. And that's really the core principle of microservices, right? Each service has to own its domain, and that's it. Okay, so you've got this tangled mess. How do you even start to unravel it without just, throwing it all out and starting from scratch? Well, you use a clear, repeatable strategy. The whole key here is to break this massive job down into small, manageable steps. You just tackle one service at a time. And here it is, the 4-step playbook. First, you start at the foundation, clean up the data models, and get rid of any dependencies on other services. Step 2, you update the repository layer. That's the code that's actually talking to your database. Third, you go up a level and refine the service logic itself. And finally, you clean up the API endpoints, which are like the public doors to your service. You follow these steps, and you get a nice, clean separation every time. All right, so let's actually see this pattern in action. We're going to start by applying these 4 steps to the customer service. The goal? To make it completely independent and self-contained. And the root of all our problems? It's right here. It's in the customer data model. You've got these direct, hard-coded links to the product model. That's the chain we need to break. Just look at this before state. See those cart and wishlist fields? They're holding a direct reference, that ref, to the entire product model. That's the tight coupling we've been talking about. It means that if anything changes over in the product model, it could totally break the customer service. Not good.
And here's the after. This is brilliant. Instead of linking to the whole product model, we're now just storing a simple little object with only the bits and pieces of information the customer service actually needs. The ID, name, price, banner. That's it. Now, the customer service has zero idea about the inner workings of the product service. It's finally free.
Okay, so with the customer service all cleaned up, we just rinse and repeat. We apply the exact same 4-step pattern to the product service. We go in, remove any mention of customers or orders, and make sure it's only responsible for one thing, product data.
And just like that, we've done it. We've hit our first major goal. We now have 2 clean, isolated services. Think of them like 2 separate castles, each one ruling its own kingdom. They have no idea the other even exists. But in solving one problem, we've just created a brand new one.
And this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? The services are clean, they're separate, but now what? If they don't know about each other, how does anything actually happen? How does a customer add a product to their wish list? How do these independent pieces come together to act like one single working application?
Well, the answer is you build a bridge. You create a communication channel that lets the services talk to each other without being tangled up again. We need them to coordinate, but without reintroducing that tight coupling we just worked so hard to get rid of.
And that bridge is built using something called a webhook. Honestly, the easiest way to think about it is as a simple notification system. When something important happens in one service, say a user adds a product to a wish list, it can just shout out a notification. And then other services can listen for that notification and decide if they need to do something.
This sets up a really simple but powerful publisher-subscriber pattern. So the product service becomes the publisher.
When a user adds an item, it publishes an add to wishlist event. It just makes a simple HTTP call. Meanwhile, the customer service is the subscriber. It has a webhook endpoint that's just listening for that specific event. When it hears it, it kicks into action and updates the user's wishlist. Simple as that.
And Jay really nails it with this quote. He says, you're just exposing one webhook. It's like putting a single, well-defined front door on your service. That endpoint becomes the official, public way for other services to talk to it, and they don't need to know anything about what's going on inside.
You know, this whole process, it's not just about moving code around. It's really about changing the way you think about building software. It's a fundamental shift. You're moving away from a world where services directly call each other's functions to a world where they just notify each other that something happened.
So, what are the big takeaways here? First, own your domain. Each service is the one and only source of truth for its own data, period. Second, communicate with events. Instead of reaching into another service's code, you just send out notifications. And third, and this is super important, this is all asynchronous. A service publishes an event and just moves on. It doesn't wait for a response. And that's what makes the entire system so much more resilient and robust. So, I'll leave you with this. The next time you're looking at a tangled piece of code, ask yourself this question. By decoupling your functions, could you be building a more scalable and resilient future for your code? Because when you break those direct dependencies and swap them for these event notifications, you're not just tidying up your code base, you're really investing in a system that's going to be easier to maintain, easier to scale, and way easier to build on for years to come.